The air in the Global Strategic Operations Center was a finely calibrated cocktail of recycled oxygen, the faint, metallic scent of ozone from acres of humming servers, and the bitter perfume of day-old coffee. It was a place hermetically sealed from the outside world, a subterranean cathedral dedicated to the grim art of simulated warfare. Light did not come from a sun, but from the cold, blue-white glow of 1,000 monitors that papered the walls of the vast, tiered amphitheater. On the central screen, a Mercator projection of the world pulsed with cryptic symbols, squadrons of fighters represented as red triangles, naval carrier groups as blue squares, all moving in a silent, deadly ballet across the continents and oceans. This was Fortress Command, the nerve center for Sovereign Shield 27, the largest and most complex multinational military exercise in a generation. And the men and women here were the gods of this digital Olympus, moving pieces in a game where the stakes were the theoretical annihilation of nations. In a forgotten corner of the highest tier, far from the frantic energy of the operations floor, a woman sat alone. She was an island of analog stillness in a raging digital sea. She did not have a glowing tablet or a secure laptop. She had a simple, spiral-bound notebook and a black pen, its cap clicking softly in the otherwise cacophonous room each time she made a notation. Her name, according to the temporary observer's badge clipped to the lapel of her plain charcoal blazer, was Dr. Anya Sharma. She was an appendix to the operation, a footnote. Her appearance was meticulously unremarkable. Brown hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She wore no makeup, no jewelry save for a simple, functional watch. Her face was pleasant, but instantly forgettable. She could have been a mid-level analyst from a budget oversight committee, or a sociologist from a university think tank studying command dynamics. She was, in the high-stakes, rank-obsessed world of Fortress Command, functionally invisible. And that seemed to be precisely how she preferred it. Her gaze was not fixed on the grand strategic map that dominated the room's attention. Instead, she watched the people. She observed the subtle shift in a junior lieutenant's posture when a superior approached, the nervous tick of a data analyst's finger on a mouse as a critical feed came in, the way a team leader's voice rose a half octave under pressure. She was not watching the war. She was studying the warriors. Her notes were not diagrams of troop movements, but spidery script that seemed to capture the frantic, fragile human element at the heart of the machine. Her stillness was profound, almost unnatural. While the room thrummed with contained chaos, she was a pool of calm water, her presence a quiet rebuke to the manufactured urgency all around her. This placid anonymity was a profound irritant to United States Air Force Major Cade Jennings. Jennings was the watch commander for this particular 12-hour slice of hell, and he patrolled the floor of the operations center like a feudal lord surveying his fiefdom. He was a man carved from the mold of a recruiting poster, square-jawed, ramrod straight, with a voice calibrated to a parade ground bark that he used even when ordering a coffee. He saw himself as the engine of this entire operation, the central gear around which all the lesser cogs turned. His authority in this room was, in his mind, absolute. He thrived on the pressure, the jargon, the self-important ballet of command. And the quiet woman in the corner was a discordant note in his symphony of control. He had noticed her an hour ago, a civilian ghost at the feast. Observers were common during these exercises, but they were usually retired generals or visiting dignitaries who made their presence known, who glad-handed and asked ponderous, self-important questions. They did not sit in a corner and simply watch, their silence a kind of judgment. He saw her plain clothes and her simple notebook and made a series of swift, effortless calculations. Academic, bureaucrat, bean counter. Someone who had never felt the G-force of a fighter jet pinning them to their seat, who had never tasted the grit of desert sand in their teeth. A tourist in his world, and he did not appreciate tourists. For an hour, he let his irritation simmer, a low-grade heat beneath his practiced veneer of command. He barked orders, his voice echoing with manufactured authority. "Give me a real-time feed from the drone swarm over the Kamchatka Peninsula. I want satellite thermal imaging now. Why is the intel from our subsurface assets lagging? Get Naval Command on the line. I want answers." He was performing, and he needed an audience. The junior officers and enlisted personnel around him were a captive one, but the woman in the corner was not playing her part. She did not seem impressed. She did not seem intimidated. She just watched, and, occasionally, she wrote. He found himself glancing her way more and more, his stride tightening, the muscles in his jaw working. Her quietude felt like a challenge. Her passivity felt like condescension. Finally, he could stand it no longer. He manufactured a reason to ascend to the upper tier, ostensibly to confer with a communications specialist. But his path was a deliberate, calculated arc that ended directly in front of her small desk. He stopped, planting his polished boots with a solid thud, forcing her to look up from her notes. He loomed over her, a tactic of physical intimidation that had served him well throughout his career. He folded his arms across his chest, the fabric of his flight suit straining, a display of casual power. "Dr. Sharma," he began, his voice a low, rumbling thing meant to convey both authority and disdain. He made a point of reading her name from the badge as if he were struggling to decipher a foreign language. "Major Cade Jennings. I'm the Watch, commander for this sector. I don't believe we've been formally introduced." She looked up, her expression placid, unreadable. There was no flicker of fear, no hint of deference. Her eyes, a deep and intelligent brown, met his without wavering. "Major," she acknowledged, her voice soft, yet carrying a strange resonance in the noisy room. It was a voice devoid of inflection, a simple statement of fact. The lack of a more elaborate response threw him off his rhythm for a fraction of a second. He had expected a nervous flutter, perhaps an overly eager explanation of her purpose there. Her calm was like a padded wall absorbing the force of his approach. He pressed on, his tone shifting into one of overt condescension. "I have to say, Doctor, you found the quietest seat in the house. Most of our observers prefer to be down in the thick of it, to get a real feel for the operational tempo." He gestured vaguely toward the chaos below. "This is where the rubber meets the road. A little different from a university seminar, I imagine. I am able to observe what I need to from here," she replied, her voice still perfectly even. She did not smile. She did not elaborate. She held his gaze for a moment longer. Then her eyes returned to her notebook, a clear and unmistakable dismissal. The move was so subtle, so utterly devoid of aggression, yet it felt to Jennings like a slap in the face. He was being dismissed. Him, the commander of this floor. His face flushed a dark, mottled red. The junior officers at the nearby consoles surreptitiously watched the interaction, a small pocket of drama in the larger storm of the war game. Jennings was keenly aware of their attention. He could not, would not, be brushed aside by some no-name civilian analyst. "That notebook," he said, his voice hardening, losing its pretense of civility. He pointed a finger at the simple, spiral-bound pad. "What exactly are you observing?" This is a classified environment, Doctor. We have strict protocols about what information leaves this room. I hope you're aware of the security regulations regarding unauthorized note-taking. Anya Sharma did not look up this time. She continued to write, her pen scratching softly on the page. My credentials and clearances were approved by the Joint Chiefs. I am aware of the protocols, Major. Her response was a textbook example of calm defiance. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply stated a fact that implicitly questioned his authority to even ask the question. It was a masterful parry, and it drove the blade of his anger in deeper. He felt his control slipping, replaced by a hot, brutish need to assert his dominance. This woman was making him look foolish in front of his own people. He took a step closer, his shadow falling completely over her desk. He leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial growl that was somehow more menacing than his usual bark. Let me be clear, ma'am. I don't care if God himself signed your clearance papers. On this floor, during my watch, my authority is paramount. I am responsible for every byte of data, every voice transmission, every human asset in this room. And your hobbyist note-taking is an unknown variable, and I don't like unknown variables. He reached out and placed his hand flat on her notebook, pinning it to the desk. It was a flagrant act of aggression, a physical violation of her space. He expected her to recoil, to gasp, to finally show some crack in her infuriatingly calm facade. She did not. She stopped writing. The pen went still in her hand. For a full 3 seconds, she did not move. Then, slowly, deliberately, she raised her head. Her eyes were different now. The placid, observational quality was gone, replaced by something ancient and cold. It was the look of a predator that has been idly watching an inferior creature, only to have that creature make a sudden, suicidal move. She was a lioness allowing a jackal to dance, at the edge of its kill radius, and the jackal had just stepped over the line. She placed her own hand on top of his. Her touch was not forceful, but it was incredibly firm, her fingers resting on his knuckles with an unnerving weight. Her skin was cool. Major, she said, and her voice was no longer soft. It was quiet, yes, but it was now laced with tempered steel. It was a voice that did not need to be raised to command absolute attention. Remove your hand from my work. It was not a request. It was a command, delivered with the serene, unshakable confidence of someone who had never, in their entire life, had such a command disobeyed. Jennings was momentarily stunned. He felt a bizarre, primal instinct to obey, a jolt of alarm that shot up his spine. Who was this woman? But his pride, his ego, and the eyes of his subordinates were all on him. He could not back down. He smirked, a weak, brittle thing. Or what, Doctor? Are you going to write a sternly worded report? Before she could answer, before the tension in that small, personal standoff could snap, the world ended. It began not with a bang, but with a color. Red. A virulent, screaming crimson that flooded every single screen in the command center simultaneously. The grand strategic map vanished, replaced by a single, ominous block of text in stark white letters. System compromised. Protocol 0 initiated. An alarm, a shrill, piercing klaxon that was reserved for only the most catastrophic of failures, began to shriek, a sound that cut through the low hum of the room and straight into the lizard brain of everyone present. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence, save for the wailing of the alarm. Then, chaos erupted. Voices rose in a panicked cacophony. What the hell was that? We've lost all external feeds. The network is down. The entire network is gone. Is this part of the exercise? Red cell? Is it red cell? Major Jennings snatched his hand back from her notebook as if he had been burned, his personal conflict instantly forgotten, vaporized by the scale of the crisis. He spun around, his face a mask of shock and dawning panic. "Status report! Now, somebody talk to me!" he bellowed, his voice cracking under the strain. His subordinates, trained for emergencies but not for this level of systemic collapse, scrambled. Their movements were jerky, inefficient. They were falling back on training that was suddenly, terrifyingly obsolete. A young captain at the communications console shouted, his voice high and thin. "Sir, I can't raise anyone. All primary and secondary comms channels are offline. We're completely deaf and blind." "Go to backups," Jennings roared, his command a desperate guess rather than a reasoned order. "Go to the tertiary satellite uplinks. Follow the goddamn playbook." "We are, sir," a sergeant yelled back from the network diagnostics station, sweat beading on his forehead. "The playbook isn't working. The virus, or whatever this is, it's not just in the network. It's in the backups. It's in the goddamn hardware controllers. It's everywhere. It anticipated our every move. Sir, it's like the system is actively fighting us." Jennings stared at the dead screens, his mind a maelstrom of failing protocols and useless contingency plans. The authority he had so proudly worn just moments before was now a cheap, hollow costume. He was an actor on a stage whose set had just collapsed around him, revealing the empty void behind. The confidence evaporated, leaving only raw, naked panic. He was shouting orders that had no meaning, demanding actions that no one could take. He was losing control, and in the stark, unforgiving light of a genuine crisis, everyone in the room could see it. He was a fraud. Amidst this spiraling disaster, Anya Sharma moved. She rose from her chair not with haste, but with a fluid, deliberate grace that was mesmerizing. The chaotic noise of the room, the shrieking alarm, the panicked shouts, it all seemed to bend around her, to not quite touch her. She placed her pen neatly beside her notebook, a small gesture of order in a world dissolving into entropy. Her face was utterly, unnervingly calm. It was not the calm of ignorance, but the calm of profound, absolute familiarity. She was not surprised. She was not afraid. She looked as if she had just been waiting for the real exam to begin. She walked down the steps from the observer's tier, her path a straight, unwavering line toward the main command console at the center of the operations floor. People scrambled out of her way, their panicked movements parting before her steady advance as if she possessed her own gravitational field. She ignored Jennings completely, her eyes fixed on the red, glowing screens. She reached the central console, the very heart of the command center, where a senior NCO was frantically typing commands that were being rejected one after another. "Step aside, Master Sergeant," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it possessed that same cutting, steely quality from before. It sliced through the din, and the sergeant, a man with 20 years of experience, looked up at her, saw the look in her eyes, and without a word, vacated the seat of command. Anya sat down. For a moment, she simply looked at the primary diagnostic screen, her head tilted slightly, like a master artisan examining a flawed piece of work. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, still and poised. Then they moved. It was not typing. It was a form of music. Her hands flew across the keys with a speed and precision that was inhuman. A black command line interface appeared on the screen, a window into the machine's tortured soul. Code scrolled past faster than the eye could read. a torrent of green and white text against the black void. She was not trying to use the system's interface. She was speaking to the system in its native tongue, a deep, arcane language of pure logic. The room began to quiet down. The panicked, shouting subsided, replaced by a growing, collective sense of awe. Everyone, from the lowest airman to the now paralyzed Major Jennings, turned to watch the unassuming woman in the charcoal blazer. She began to issue orders, her voice never rising, yet each word landing with the force of a physical blow. Kill the physical firewalls. They're compromised. They're broadcasting our position. Do it now. A lieutenant, jolted from his stupor, scrambled to comply. Someone get me a direct fiber optic link to the NSA's Talon server farm in Utah. Use authentication code Sierra 99 Alpha Echo. Tell them Minerva has invoked Emergency Directive 7. The name meant nothing to anyone in the room, but the sheer, unshakable authority with which she spoke sent a communications officer sprinting to a secure hardline phone. The attack vector isn't external, she announced to the room, her eyes never leaving the waterfall of code on her screen. It's a logic bomb that was embedded in the last system update from a third-party contractor. It's polymorphic, designed to mimic our own diagnostic tools. It's brilliant. There was a note of professional appreciation in her voice, the sound of a grandmaster admiring a worthy opponent's move. Major Jennings stood a few feet away, his mouth agape. He was watching a language he could not comprehend, a level of expertise so far beyond his own that it might as well have been magic. The woman he had dismissed as a paper pusher, the academic he had tried to intimidate, was now methodically, single-handedly, dissecting a cyber attack that had brought the most advanced military network on the planet to its knees. She was not fighting the system. She was performing surgery on it. One by one, under her calm, precise guidance, pieces of the network began to come back to life. A single screen flickered from red to blue, displaying a stable data link. Then another, and another. The shrill klaxon cut off abruptly, plunging the room into a ringing, cathedral-like silence, broken only by the furious clicking of her keyboard and the soft, authoritative cadence of her voice. She was rebuilding their world from the ashes, line by painful line of code. The onlookers were no longer soldiers and analysts. They were spectators at a masterclass, witnessing a level of competence so pure and so absolute that it was humbling. They were watching a master at work, and the experience was fundamentally changing their understanding of what power and authority truly meant. The massive double doors at the rear of the operations center burst open with a pneumatic hiss, and General Marcus Madsen of the United States Navy strode in, flanked by two grim-faced aides. Madsen was the overall director of the entire Sovereign Shield exercise, a 3-star admiral whose face looked like it had been carved from naval tradition itself. He was a living legend, a man who radiated authority like heat from a furnace. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, swept across the room, taking in the partially restored screens and the stunned, silent personnel. His face was a thundercloud of pure, incandescent rage. "What in the goddamn hell happened to my network?" he boomed, his voice a physical force that made the air tremble. "I want a full report from the watch commander in 60 seconds, or I swear to God I will personally see him transferred to a weather station in Thule." Every eye in the room swiveled from the woman at the console to the furious admiral, and then to Major Cade Jennings. Jennings turned pale, a clammy sweat breaking out on his brow. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a dry, croaking sound came out. He was a man hollowed out, his pride and arrogance stripped away, leaving nothing but the terrified shell of an officer about to be professionally executed. He was broken. General Madsen's gaze followed everyone else's, finally landing on the small, unfamiliar figure sitting at his main command console. He saw the back of a woman in a civilian blazer, her hands still a blur on the keyboard as she worked. His rage intensified. "Who the hell is this? Who is the civilian at my command station?" he roared, taking a threatening step forward. "I want her removed, now!" Anya Sharma finished typing a final, complex line of code. She hit the enter key with a soft, definitive tap. On the main screen, the last block of red vanished, replaced by the familiar, stable Mercator projection of the world. The network was fully restored. The system was clean. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. Only then did she stop. She rolled her shoulders once, a small human gesture of fatigue, and slowly turned in the chair to face the advancing admiral. As she turned, the sleeve of her blazer, which she had pushed up her forearm while working, slid down slightly. It exposed the pale skin of her inner wrist and the small, intricate tattoo that was inked there. It was not a flashy or colorful design. It was a simple, stark, black line drawing, an Ouroboros, the ancient symbol of a serpent eating its own tail. But inside the circle formed by the serpent's body was a single, stylized representation of an owl, its wings spread wide. General Madsen stopped dead in his tracks. His forward momentum ceased so abruptly it was as if he had run into a wall of glass. His eyes, which had been blazing with fury, widened in disbelief. The color drained from his face. He stared at the tattoo, his mind struggling to process the impossible. He knew that symbol. It was a ghost, a myth, a whisper in the highest, most classified corridors of global intelligence. It was the unofficial insignia of a unit that did not officially exist, a clandestine group of cyber warfare architects and operators known only by a single, terrifying codename. His rage vanished, replaced by a wave of something else entirely. Awe, shock, and a sudden, profound, bottomless well of professional respect. His entire posture changed. The furious, intimidating admiral disappeared, and in his place stood a subordinate officer in the presence of a higher, almost mythical authority. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight. His hand snapped to his brow in the sharpest, most precise salute he had ever rendered in his 40-year career. "Attention on deck!" he bellowed, his voice no longer angry, but filled with a thunderous, ringing reverence. The command was so sudden, so utterly incongruous with the situation, that it took a moment to register. Then, as one, every single military person in the room, from the lowest airman to the colonels on the upper tier, snapped to rigid attention, their bodies ramming into place with a sound like tearing canvas. Major Cade Jennings, his face a mask of utter, soul-shattering confusion, was the last to react, his body moving on pure, ingrained instinct. The vast, high-tech room was suddenly transformed into a silent, frozen tableau of military deference. General Madsen held his salute, his eyes locked on the woman in the chair. He did not speak to Anya Sharma, the civilian observer. He spoke to the symbol on her wrist. "Ma'am," he said, his voice now quiet, respectful, and trembling with the slightest hint of fear. "My deepest apologies. I was not informed that Minerva would be personally auditing this exercise. They told me they were sending an observer. They did not tell me they were sending the architect." The name descended into the silent room like a bomb. Minerva. It was not a name on a roster. It was a legend. Minerva was the ghost in the machine, the rumored founder of the West's entire cyber defense doctrine. the person credited with single-handedly thwarting the great financial hack of 22 and the power grid attack of 25. A figure of such monumental importance that her real name and face were classified above the level of most sitting presidents. She was not just an operator. She was the one who wrote the rules of this new, invisible form of warfare. And she was sitting right there, in a plain charcoal blazer, having just been condescended to and physically accosted by a mid-level major. The narrator of this story could now fill in the blanks, could list the litany of her achievements that were whispered in hushed tones in secure rooms around the globe. The Presidential Medal of Freedom with a classified citation, the National Security Medal awarded in a ceremony so secret that no record of it exists. The creator of the Aegis defensive protocol that protected the nation's critical infrastructure, and the Styx counterattack system that could, with a few keystrokes, plunge an enemy nation back into the Dark Ages. Dr. Anya Sharma was a cover name, a convenient fiction. The woman sitting in that chair was, for all intents and purposes, the single most powerful warrior in the room, and her battlefield was one where bullets and bombs were clumsy, archaic relics. Anya, Minerva, looked at the saluting admiral. She gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of acknowledgement that was somehow more regal than a return salute would have been. "It's all right, General. You may stand them down. The crisis is averted. The simulation can continue." "At ease," Madsen commanded, his voice still strained. He dropped his salute but remained ramrod straight. The rustle of movement as hundreds of personnel relaxed was the only sound. Madsen's eyes, however, now flickered over to the pale, trembling form of Major Jennings. The Admiral's expression hardened into one of pure, unadulterated contempt. He was about to speak, to verbally flay the man where he stood, but Minerva raised a hand, a small, placating gesture. She turned her full attention back to Jennings. Her gaze was not angry or triumphant. It was clinical, the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a failed experiment. "Major Jennings," she said, her voice returning to its soft, even tone. The contrast between the quietness of her voice and the sheer weight of her revealed identity was staggering. Jennings flinched, as if she had struck him. He could not meet her eyes. He stared at a point on the floor somewhere past her feet, his entire body rigid with shame and terror. "Ma'am," he whispered, the word barely audible. "Your actions earlier," she continued, her voice a calm scalpel dissecting his failure, "were not a personal insult. I am not insulted. They were a critical tactical failure. Your threat assessment capability is fundamentally flawed. You evaluated a potential asset based on superficial, irrelevant data, my gender, my civilian attire, my quiet demeanor. You allowed your ego and your prejudices to formulate your entire strategic response. That response was to attempt to neutralize the asset through intimidation." She paused, letting the words hang in the silent, attentive air. "In a real-world engagement, Major, that failure would not have resulted in your personal embarrassment. It would have resulted in the complete and utter annihilation of your command and the catastrophic loss of every asset under your protection. Your pride would have cost lives. Not theoretical lives in a game, but real ones. Do you understand that?" "Yes, ma'am," Jennings choked out, his head bowed. The public dismantling of his entire professional identity was complete. He had never felt so small, so utterly insignificant in his entire life. General Madsen finally spoke, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Ma'am, I will have his command revoked immediately. I'll start the paperwork for a full Article 15. He'll be lucky if he's still in the service by the end of the week. No, Minerva said simply. The entire room, Madsen included, looked at her in surprise. That would be inefficient. A mark on his permanent record will teach him to be more careful. It will not teach him to be better. He does not require punishment, General. He requires an education. She looked back at the shattered major. For the remainder of this exercise, and for the following 6 months, Major Jennings will be reassigned. He is to be my new executive aide. He will carry my briefcase. He will fetch my coffee. He will sit in every meeting, every briefing, and every debriefing I attend. He will see what I see. He will learn how to distinguish a threat from an asset. He will learn that the modern battle space is not defined by rank or uniform, but by competence. And he will learn humility. Is that understood, General? Madsen was stunned, but he recovered quickly. It was a brilliant, elegant, and utterly devastating solution. It was not punishment. It was a forced re-education at the feet of the master. It was, in its own way, a far more profound sentence than any court-martial could deliver. Yes, ma'am, the Admiral said with a nod of deep respect. Consider it done. The story of that day, of course, passed into the annals of military lore. It became a fable, a cautionary tale whispered at the War College and at officer candidate schools. It was known as Jennings' Folly, or sometimes the day Minerva came to watch. The details were embellished with each telling, the number of screens that went red, the volume of the general's shouting, the complexity of the code she wrote. But the core of the story, the essential truth of it, remained intact. It became a teaching tool, a stark and powerful lesson in the dangers of hubris. Years passed. Major Cade Jennings ceased to exist. In his place, a new man was forged. The 6 months he spent as Minerva's aide were the most grueling, humbling, and transformative of his life. He saw a world of warfare he never knew existed. He saw quiet, unassuming people, analysts in sweaters, coders in hoodies, linguists in rumpled shirts, wielding more power than an entire armored division. He learned that true strength was not loud, but quiet. It was not boastful, but demonstrated. He learned to see, beyond the uniform, beyond the surface, and to assess the substance within. A decade later, Colonel Cade Jennings stood before a lecture hall full of bright-eyed, newly minted lieutenants at the Air Force Academy. He was a different man. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, steady confidence. He was known as one of the most insightful and respected instructors at the academy, a man who taught strategic theory with a passion and wisdom that captivated his students. Your greatest enemy, he told the silent, attentive room, will not be a foreign power. It will not be a new piece of enemy hardware. It will be your own assumptions. It will be the blind spot in your own vision that tells you who is and who is not important, who is and who is not a threat, who does and who does not belong. He paused, and a sad, knowing smile touched his lips. Let me tell you a story, he said. It's about a major who thought he was king of the world, and a quiet woman with a notebook who taught him that he didn't even understand the game. And so, the lesson was passed on. The fable lived, not just as a warning, but as a promise. It served as a powerful, enduring reminder of a fundamental truth that transcends the military, that applies to every boardroom, every classroom, every human interaction. The truth that competence is its own authority, that true strength requires no announcement, that substance will always, in the end, triumph over style. It is the quiet professional, the hidden master, who so often holds the keys to the kingdom. And one should be very, very careful not to judge the world by the simplicity of its cover, for you never know when you are in the presence of a legend, a quiet observer who has come only to watch, until the moment comes when they are needed to save it all.